Because of various family things going on right now, I've started a family history project, scanning and organizing generations worth of pictures and bits of ephemera, including Civil War discharge papers and homestead documents. I'm getting to see the places I grew up in dust-flecked shades of gray and copper, comparing photographs from 1913 to VHS tapes from 1989 to video I took on my iPhone last summer. It's put me in a place of enhanced perspective, and it's hard to view the trips back to eastern Washington and northern Idaho as anything other than time travel or personal pilgrimages right now. It feels a little pretentious and fake to say something that could be interpreted as overwrought and hyperbolic, but I'll risk the eye roll because the sentiment is genuine. There's a road just outside of Colfax, Washington that's named after a branch of my family. The Parvins homesteaded out on that road, first a small cabin, then a frame house, and later this ranch house built in the early 1900s. Some new siding was put on in the mid-90s, but this is the same house that stood for about 100 years. My grandparents owned the house, my aunt, uncle, and cousins lived in it, and we visited pretty often after we moved back to Colfax in 1995. I was just starting elementary school. My sisters and I would build stuff in the old sheep barn, which later caught fire and is now just a pile of wood and bits of metal. We would crouch under the trees and pick apart owl pellets looking for little bones, and play in the creek and fall into stinging nettles and tag along after our cousins, who were teenagers and therefore the absolute coolest people on the planet. During the week when my sisters were at youth group, I would hang out with my great-grandmother, who lived there when she was a girl, and she'd tell me about driving from the ranch into town when there were still wooden sidewalks and the horses they used to keep there, and how her mother would trade with members of the local tribe who would come to the kitchen door. The same kitchen door I wasn't allowed to walk through when I would come back from attempting to swim in the creek, dripping mud and giardia all over the place. My family never lived at the ranch house, but it was a huge part of my childhood, and the history of it and the knowledge that some of the larger family was still living in it was something that made Colfax home for us very quickly. Even though I'd never actually lived in Colfax before, as a kid, it still felt like coming home to something. After we moved and the part of our family living at the ranch moved as well, it was rented out, and then for a long time it stood empty. My sisters and I helped my uncle paint it and renovate it a bit when I was in high school and college, but it was empty for a long time. It's still empty. We visited it last month, but we didn't have the keys to get in. So we wandered the land around it and peered in the windows and took pictures and dug through what was left of the sheep barn. It felt a little like going back to a secret fort you had when you were a kid. It's just sitting there waiting for someone who knows about it. We're getting rid of it. A new family is going to move in, rent it with the intention of buying it. We have to clean up the paint and tools still out there from when we worked on it with my uncle, move my grandmother's old chairs out, find a place for my grandfather's old boat, and essentially erase ourselves from the house. It feels immense, like erasing the contents of a century-old journal and turning it into a blank book, or pulling all of the pictures out of your great-great-grandfather's picture frames and giving them to someone else to fill. It's hard to think of this as just another part of the story of the house, even though that's all it is. When I was younger, I didn't think consciously about what family or history or home meant very often, and it's hard to be very articulate about things you've never had to think about. But I keep thinking right now that objects and places are ghosts that are charged on the people who remember what they mean. And maybe this house will mean something else, and it'll gain a new character and a new story. And that's fine. But it feels like leaving someone behind, and even though that's normal and natural and it happens all the time, right now it still kind of feels hard.